Good morning, everybody. Right, now we're just getting ready for our second Salt Live this morning, and I'm just going to invite a special guest who's going to be joining us this morning, who we have been working with quite a bit recently. Let's just see if Rebus joining us. Let's see, just wait for him to connect. Hello!
Hey Charlotte, how are you?
Good.
Cool.
Yes, the connection works, that's always
Yes.
good.
You're going to have to bear with any strange noises. My next door neighbours have got roofers in today, which is really handy.
Ideal.
Yeah, just what we wanted.
Well, we've discovered a party horn and we're making tigers here today, so
Okay.
anything could happen. I'm just going to move this back because I want to make sure that we can see something in the background. So, thank you so much for joining us this morning.
Thanks for
We're
having me on.
excited about this conversation because I know we've spoken quite a few times and we've known each other for a few years now, but I think it's always interesting to see what comes out of these conversations. So
Yeah, definitely.
So did you want to start off with telling us a little bit about yourself, introduce yourself and what you do?
Yeah, sure. My name's Tom Sutcliffe. Some people may know my work under my pseudonym, which is Rebus Illustration. I grew up in Cambridge, lived there till I was about 17, and then moved down to Cornwall. Lived down in St Ives for about 14 years, and I now live up in Plymouth.
Yep.
I say up, it's not particularly up, is it? It's still deep south, but yeah, I live in Plymouth now, where I did my degree in illustration, and I'm now back at uni doing my master's. So I do freelance illustration, mural painting, graphic design, a bit of everything, really. Try and keep it nice and broad.
Anything that's creative that you can have a go at.
Exactly, yeah, exactly that.
And there's, for those who are watching who are not familiar with your work, obviously there's an example behind us here, a print that arrived yesterday that we just could not wait to put in a frame. And I don't think I've ever known a print to be so desperate to go in a frame and go on the wall. I was like, must find space for it. So, no, we're really pleased to have it on the wall. And even my daughter, when it arrived, she said, that's the picture from your phone, Mummy, because obviously we've been looking on Instagram, and she loves it. So so this is an example of, and actually I'm just going to push it back a little bit further so people can see it. So there's an example of one of your pieces of work. But how would you describe your work?
Yeah, it's really difficult. I think, as you said a second ago, kind of any creative opportunity that kind of arises, I will try and kind of throw myself at. But essentially, so I started out creatively when I lived in Cambridge, and I got into graffiti and street art. That was kind of my learning ground. But what's interesting is that I came from very kind of traditional art background. So my grandfather is quite a well-known typographer. He's a guy called Will Carter. So he did loads of font design, typesetting, and carving and stuff like that. So I've come from a kind of a very traditional artistic family, and then got into kind of a very new and fresh kind of street art style. So there's bits of both in there. So whilst yes, I do a lot of kind of graffiti and street art, and it's very bright and vibrant and textural, and I don't want to use the word cool, but essentially that's kind of what I go for. But it's got kind of traditional composition and understanding of like letter spacing and typography and stuff like that. So yeah, it's really hard to describe because my work is incredibly varied and I do a lot of different stuff. But yeah, what's interesting is that I've spoken to a few people about it, and where I don't see a kind of a common thread in my work, a lot of people do kind of see that, which I find really interesting. You know, they can see my work and go, oh, well, Tom did that. And I don't really understand how. Yeah.
It's always the way when you're really close to something, it's sometimes difficult to see those similarities because it's, you know, it's second nature. It's just how you work. It's become your mark.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
actually, and sometimes it becomes a bit exhausting when you almost create a brand for yourself and you almost feel like you're stuck in a box, don't you? And you feel like that's how you have to produce everything. Whereas if you can remain free and if you can still create that mark without feeling like you're stuck in that box, that's really exciting. Keeps the
Yeah,
idea
definitely.
as well,
Yeah,
doesn't
yeah,
it?
yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Well, oh God, I didn't know about your grandfather being a typographer. I mean, that must
Mm.
be, I mean, and he would have been a real traditional, I
Oh
mean,
yeah,
the tools and his skills must be incredible.
yeah. So his basement in his house in Cambridge had, you know, had a proper massive cast iron printing press, and he had a screen set up, and just these racks and racks of, you know, little tiny lead type pieces. I mean, he was pretty big. He actually carved Eric Gill's tombstone, so as in the
Wow.
font Gill Sans, yeah. So, you know, he's pretty well known, and I'm pretty sure the Independents still use his font Octavian, which he
Really?
designed. Yeah, yeah. So he's a big name, definitely.
Have you ever thought about collaborating with him?
Unfortunately, he passed away a few years ago, so
Oh, I'm
can't do
sorry.
that anymore. No, that's all right.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I've got loads of his work kind of dotted around, bits of carving and printing and whatnot. So yeah, it's great stuff.
Lovely to have that inspiration in the family.
Definitely.
Kind of
Yeah,
feel
yeah,
that duty to keep it going, don't you?
yeah,
So I'm just looking at because I gave you a few questions to help you prepare. So we've talked about your word, but how would you describe your illustrations or your work in 3 words?
yeah. I found this question quite hard. So the three words I came up with were textured, vibrant, and subtle. So yeah, texture is something that I kind of try and inject into my work as much as possible. I doubt people will be able to see it on that print behind you, but there's a lot of traditional print textures and kind of spray paint splats and you know, stuff like that. Because I work predominantly in a digital medium, I find digital work can become very flat if you just leave it as it is. You know, kind of digital work doesn't really have kind of an inherent texture, so you have to inject that in yourself. Vibrant, the colors I use are quite often extremely bright. So you see MYK a lot, you know, coming from a kind of a print background, those ones kind of really sing with me. And then saying subtle after vibrant, I suppose, is a bit weird, but I try and have a kind of subtle intelligence to my work, if that makes sense. So I like it to be, how do I put this? I like it to look very simple, but actually be quite complex underneath the surface.
Yes.
So you would look at a piece and go, "Oh, that's really nice," but then actually, when you start kind of deconstructing it, you realise quite how much work and quite how much thought has gone into it, essentially. But that's the key of good design, right? You know, you don't realise how good it is because it looks right, basically.
So no, it's interesting that you really want that process to show in the finished product, and there's a real consideration. So it's interesting how there's it's almost as if you combine almost like a graphic design role and an illustration role and an artist role all in together into
Yeah,
that
definitely. Yeah, yeah.
work. No, that's quite
I think that's
interesting. Yeah.
I I chose the illustration degree over kind of a fine art or a graphic design one. You know, illustration seems to be you have to be that kind of jack of all trades. You know, you have to be able to dip your toe into any pool and kind of like bring it together in
Yeah.
this kind of melting pot. Yeah.
Really exciting. So, just moving on to the next question. So, can you tell us about an image or an artwork or an object that you have either in your studio or on the wall where you work, or that always tends to be there and offers inspiration?
Yeah. I mean, you've seen a photo of my wall. There's a lot of images on there, and kind of objects dotted around. But interestingly, as you could probably spot, plants are the one thing that I have to have in my studio and kind of in my space at all time. This room isn't particularly big, and I think there's 15 plants in it, which is probably getting a little bit excessive. But yeah, so yeah, my cheese plant is kind of slowly encroaching on my desk space.
You like to
Yeah,
live in a jungle then?
yeah, definitely. Yeah, yeah.
It's funny actually. I've started surrounding myself with plants, especially during lockdown. And every now and again, I can't stop myself. I go to the farmer's market, and I'm like, oh, just another little plant.
Yeah, yeah, it becomes horribly addictive.
No, that's really interesting. But then obviously a lot of the plants that you have in your working space are green, but the green doesn't tend to show in your work. But it's more about, I guess, to a certain extent, is it well-being that you?
I think it's well-being, and a lot of the shapes within plants kind of find their way into my work, I think. But yeah, not necessarily. I don't know why I don't use green that much. It's not a color that I've ever really wanted to paint with. But yeah, definitely the shapes and the kind of, the jungle textures and all that kind of stuff. Yeah.
Okay. I've just thought of a question, and it may be something that you want to think about, but obviously you believe in traditional techniques, and that's really important to you, but you use digital technology to produce your work.
Yeah.
Is the reason because it's easier to replicate and it suits current situation, and it's easier to print, etc.? Or is there a conscious reason why you use Procreate, for example? And
I think it's mainly, like ease of use, and the fact that I can essentially do everything on my iPad now. I can start off. I can do. So a good example is when I was doing the murals Street Factory recently. So I would sketch it out in pencil on my iPad. I would then go in, find the wall that I was going to be doing it on, take a photo of the wall, superimpose the sketch onto that, then kind of fill all the colors in, get the composition right, then get a projector, plug my iPad into that, project it onto the wall so that I can get it all marked out properly. I can do a completely finished artwork on there and email it to a client from my iPad. So, I spend a lot of time on trains. My daughter lives down in Cornwall. And the fact that I can have kind of my entire studio just in my bag with me is, it's just incredibly useful. But there's a lot to be said for not ignoring traditional techniques, and so Steve, who was on with you on the last one, he and I were talking about this a lot recently, saying how digital work is is great and it's very convenient, and you don't need a lot of space, but actually we're both kind of constantly needing that kind of inky fingers and paint on our shoes and whatnot. Yeah
it's it feels good when you've been in the studio and you're just covered in paint.
Yeah definitely.
I recall the days of coming, because I lived at home when I studied my degree, and I used to come home with bitumen on the bottoms of my feet. My mum used to put the washing up bowl at the front door going, "You're not coming in until you..." I was covered, absolutely covered, and I was never happy until I could smell terps all day.
I know, yeah. There's something about the smell of spray paint that kind of something clicks in my head as soon as I smell it. It's like, oh, you instantly feel inspired. It's funny.
That maybe that'll be the next generation. The next iPad will give you some kind of scent. Right, I'm just moving on. So, can you share an experience which has inspired you or moved you in some way? So it could be a cultural experience, it could be an artwork that you've seen, it could be maybe a view while you were traveling, or an event or a festival that you've experienced.
So back in what year was it? 2006. My godfather gave me this just incredible present that he basically, when he was younger, went on a course in Italy with a company called Art History Abroad.
Okay.
And he basically sent me on this course. He was kind of like, right, you know, you're a grown up now. You don't need a godparent anymore. This is my kind of signing off present. So he sent me on this course, which lasted for 2 months. And over that 2 months, we did Venice, Verona, Siena, Florence, Naples, and Rome.
Wow.
Every single day, going round with, you know, professional art historians around all different galleries. We went to Sistine Chapel. We went to, you know, see the Mona Lisa, like kind of, you know, the whole set. And it was just like the most incredible 2 months of my life, as you can imagine. You know, just being in Italy, eating Italian food, drinking wine, going and seeing incredible artwork every day.
Wow.
And, you know, because they're such a big organization, they've got, you know, quite a bit of clout. So when we went to the Sistine Chapel, they'd actually closed the Sistine Chapel. So it was only 20 of us in there. And we were allowed to lie on the floor looking up at the ceiling, you know, whereas normally you'd be in a crowd of kind of, you know, a couple of thousand people. So we're kind of lying on the floor looking up at the ceiling. It was just one of those kind of, God, I'm never going to get to do this again, basically.
I bet you never wanted to leave.
No, it was really, really painful. Yeah, coming home was
come back
not
for
great.
me tomorrow. I'm fine here.
Yeah, incredible 2 months.
And can you, has anything that you encountered there directly inspired your work, would you say? Or
yeah, definitely. Yeah. I think
you know, composition or
definitely composition, use of light. Yeah, so like Caravaggio was kind of one of the big ones that stood out for me. So, you know, chiaroscuro, so his act of starting with like a dark canvas and painting bright colors onto it to bring it out to the gloom, you know, stuff like that definitely kind of stuck in my work. And I think, you know, that's definitely quite evident. If you look at, I do it subconsciously. It's really funny. Like I'll do an illustration, and then if I put a composition grid over the top, it's kind of hitting all the relevant points.
That's incredible.
So I think, yeah, it's really bizarre. Yeah.
You should share that one day on Instagram. It'd be really interesting to see.
Yeah, no, it's a good shout.
It's really important to get composition right, and it's something that Steve and I talk about a lot, who does our design, that we had on in Salt Live last week, is that you have to, if it doesn't look right, it's like anything. If a plant's in the wrong place in your lounge, it just doesn't sit right with you.
No, exactly.
Composition. Yep. And then sometimes it can completely spoil an image for you.
Yeah.
Even down to, you know, spacing of typography or something. Just sometimes
yeah.
You know, I can't enjoy it because that's just in the wrong place.
It's and if if you get your composition wrong and you have kind of leading lines going in the wrong direction, as soon as you look at an image, it will take your eyes off and out, and you're gone. And you're not looking at it anymore. You know, and it's really important to kind of constantly have that in your mind of like, how do I keep someone's attention on the picture? How do I keep their eye moving around it so they're not kind of sat in just one spot all the time? Yeah, it's incredibly important.
It's fascinating. There's so much, you know, it's a completely open field talking about composition, and might be quite interesting to talk about it again and do another conversation, because it would be interesting to hear different people's perspective on it.
Yeah, definitely.
Great conversation.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay, so the next question. So you have another hidden talent.
I don't know if it's that hidden. I do bang on about it a lot.
So you're a DJ.
Yep.
And while you're, which I find really interesting, and I am possibly crudely assuming that music inspires what you create. Is there any particular music that you like to listen to while you're creating in your studio?
Yeah, I actually talk about this quite a lot with a lot of people. So it's I wouldn't say directly that music inspires my work, but I use music as a kind of an additional tool within my kind of arsenal. So when I say that, what I mean is that if I need to do work of a certain style, I will listen to music of a certain genre. because it will kind
Really?
of push me in that direction. Yeah. So if I'm doing kind of a large outdoor, big scale kind of mural on a wall, it's typically kind of, drum and bass or garage or something like that, something kind of like quite high energy that will keep me motivated and keep me going. Whereas if I'm working on a kind of really super high detail print, probably kind of like slow the tempo down a bit and have something maybe a bit more vocal, something that I can kind of not particularly zone out to, but just, I can put it on and just kind of get locked into the image. So yeah, it's definitely it's something that, I would never go and approach a piece without a pair of headphones or speakers around me. Just I couldn't do it. Yeah.
That's interesting. So you almost set the scene before you
Yeah.
create work.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, and I have thought. I can't remember if we spoke about this the other day. I have thought about in my work, kind of including, say, like a QR code that you can
Yeah.
scan that will take you to a piece of music that I was listening to when I created it. Because I do think it's interesting. People would be keen to kind of hear the full package, as it were. What you were listening to whilst you were doing it.
I think that's a fascinating concept, and the idea of being able to go into a gallery or a museum and being able to scan a piece of work, and there's another dimension that maybe encourages people to put the headphones on and they create that solitary space between themselves and
Yeah.
the artwork. And then,
Yep.
if they could then keep that track, which is then a gift from that artwork, which encourages them to continue reflecting on it, would
Yeah,
be really
exactly.
beautiful.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
I always think that people don't, and I think it's quite sad, is that people don't have the confidence to linger too long when they look at a piece of artwork in a public space.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like, I've read that, I've had a little look, yeah, move on to the next one. And it does
Yeah.
take quite a lot of confidence to do that. Whereas if you offer another form of interaction, then it encourages that.
Yeah.
And then you kind of think, oh, well, everyone else has got their headphones and they're looking at it in that way. And you think, okay. And you immediately switch off from what's going on around you, because it's so easy to be distracted as well.
Yeah, definitely.
And
Definitely.
conscious of other people wanting to come and have a look, etc. So
Yeah.
very interesting.
Interesting one. Yeah.
Yeah. Final question for you.
Mhm.
If you were to choose one person to display one of your illustrations in their homes, who might it be?
I spent it's
It's a
really
really
tricky.
tricky one.
I spent a good half hour on this morning, just kind of like, I don't know. It would have to be Tom York from Radiohead, I think.
Interesting. Okay.
Just purely for the fact that, and feel free to disagree with me. Anyone that's watching, from my point of view, his taste in music, art, fashion, all creative aspects is just immaculate. That he can do no wrong. So I think if he's got one of my prints on his wall, then I've definitely I'm doing something right. If he's kind of gone, yeah, I'm going to have that, then I've hit where I need to be, I think. Yeah.
So it would be like almost like a final sign of approval.
Yeah.
Seal of
Yeah.
approval.
Exactly. Yeah. 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 If Tom says yes, then I think we're doing okay.
That little pat on the back. Brilliant. Okay, so thank you so much for answering my questions. And now I
No
believe
problem.
you're going to put me on the spot and ask me 2 questions yourself.
Yeah. Okay. So the past year has been kind of pretty hectic and a bit strange for everyone. And obviously we've had a kind of a lot of things kind of stripped away from us, like our freedom and being around people, live events, going to we spoke about going to galleries, stuff like that. Everything's been taken away. But the flip side of that is that a lot of stuff has actually been kind of introduced this year. So there's been lots of new stuff that's happened, and new processes and new ways of kind of living your life. So what would be the one thing that has kind of manifested in the past year that moving forward you really want to kind of keep going?
The one thing. Oh, okay. Let me think about this. It's a tricky one. It's a really tricky one. I can think of two, which is cheating, isn't it?
Go for two if you want.
Well, there's two. There's on a personal level. It's made me realise the importance of your work and life balance and spending a good amount of time with family, and especially my daughter's 5 and changing by the day. We've learnt a lot together while I've been working, and we've been doing homeschooling, and we've been creating things together at home and going on walks, having lovely conversations. So that's definitely made me realise the importance of that. And equally, when you give a bit more time to family, then it helps clear your mind and you're a bit more rational. And then if you've just got 2 hours to focus on your work, you actually get a lot done. So you can be a lot more productive. Salt projects business wise, I think it's really interesting that we've embraced a whole new way of interacting with people across the world online. And I mean, for example, I may not have even started these Salt Live conversations, which I'm really enjoying already, and we're on our second one. So I think definitely there's an aspect of actually using technology to access a broad audience and to engage with people, and offering events to people that are accessible, because actually for a long time a lot of people are going to be shielding and they are going to be isolated. But actually even before COVID, there's a lot of people who haven't been able to access these events. I mean, as a crude example, not everyone wants to be able to spend 4 days getting muddy at Glastonbury. But actually, if they can engage with it and they can watch it on the BBC, it works. I know we signed up to the Tomorrowland for New Year's Eve, and it was just insane. And just seeing what the technology can do is incredible. So I definitely think everything that I deliver, I want to be able to offer an online, accessible, interactive version of. So
we spoke about this. We spoke about this the other day, didn't we? About how do you replace art galleries? When there's something about standing in front of a wall and seeing artwork face to face, like in the flesh, and that's something that we can't really do at the minute. And there's bad sides to that, but it's also kind of like there's a lot of good in that, because it's making people become a lot more creative about how they display their artwork. You can't just do work and stick it up on Instagram and expect it to be kind of well received all the time. You have to be a lot more thoughtful in that. You have to kind of like introduce like animation and, like we said, like bring in music and sound and whatnot. And I think seeing the way that people have kind of manipulated their practice to kind of deal with what's going on, it's really interesting.
And people are desperate to be stimulated and inspired at the moment. And unfortunately, we are a society who just scan information, scan images, and it's got to either have a personal connection or something that's striking about it that makes us look at it for longer. So, and I think it's going to be really interesting to see what happens in the next 12 to 24 months. Definitely.
Yeah, definitely.
It'll be interesting to see what galleries embrace as well. I mean, we all desperately miss going to galleries, but it'll come in time. But I think it can be enhanced more. And
I think so.
All the times, there's been a show on at the Tate Modern, and I just haven't managed to get up to London because I'm based in Cornwall, and it's sometimes things get in the way, and you miss that show. Whereas if you can experience it in other ways with curators' talks and animations, etc., it'd be amazing, and it would mean something. You'd feel like you've experienced even just an aspect of it would make a difference.
It's interesting though, isn't it?
Here.
Sorry, go for it.
Yeah, no, I've just seen Ali has posed a question here for you. Have you ever had any dilemma about choosing one final illustration among your artworks?
Interesting. No, not really. No.
At least honest.
No, I think because I put so much time into preparatory sketches and kind of working through making sure that the images are kind of as strong as possible. I think when I get to the point of it being kind of near the end of an image, I know that it's doing what I want it to do. You know, it's rare that, you know, I would never release an artwork that I've kind of like still struggling with or still battling with. Like it has to be done. Matt's chimed in on this as well.
I know.
How
They're
how do you
writing
know
it
when a
down.
piece is finished? Yeah. That's the hard one, isn't it? How do you know when it's done? I think when I realise that I'm adding detail for detail's sake, essentially, you know, and it's really interesting that there's pieces that I will spend 10, 15, 20 hours on, you know, which still aren't done, still need more work. And then you've got, you know, the tiger, which is behind your head. And I think that took maybe like half an hour to do that, maybe an hour, if that. So it's kind of, sometimes you have to just kind of go, oh, it's done. It doesn't need anything else, you know. It's definitely a hard skill to learn, you know, to kind of like not be constantly hunting that kind of perfection, you know, embrace.
Always a call that comes through in the middle of your life.
Yeah.
It's a tricky one to do, and I know when I used to work in my, I haven't painted for years now, but when I used to paint in the studios, I just sometimes just walk away from it and come back the next day and say, right, come on, step away from it.
Yeah.
Look at it tomorrow or next week, and just give it time.
Yeah. And you know, and like you say, time is really important. Sleep is really important as well. Like if I'm working on an image and kind of really battling with it, and you know, no matter what I do, I can't get it right. I will leave it and I'll go to sleep, and I wake up in the morning and it will just be there, you know. And I think there's something about allowing your subconscious brain to have time to kind of to take things apart and analyze it, and then, you know, when you come back to it, it's all seems to be there. Sounds very kind of hippie-ish, doesn't it?
No, not at all. Not at all. Not at all. Right, your final question for me.
Yeah, nice easy one. If you were in a band, what instrument would you play?
Oh wow, okay. I used to play the flute.
Okay.
That's a bit geeky now.
You could do a bit of Ron Burgundy jazz flute solo.
If I were to play an instrument, I think it would depend what mood I was in, but I'm thinking if I was a bit more chilled out, it would be acoustic guitar. But if I was looking for Matt, you cheeky, I was going to say flute. Or if I was feeling a bit more energetic and wanted to kind of get some ideas going, it might be the drums.
Cool. Yeah. Be good fun.
Never been asked that. It's a good one. I like it.
Okay.
Brilliant. Well, I just want to say a huge thank you to everybody who's tuned in and listened to us. It's been, as always, a fascinating conversation. Great to have some questions as well. Thank you everyone for engaging. We're going to save this, make it available for anyone to watch later, and possibly have another catch up in a couple of months.
Yeah, sounds good.
But thanks again, everyone. Have a really good day, and I'll speak to you soon.
Brilliant.
Take care.
Thanks, Charlotte.
Bye.
Take care. Bye.